Hi, everyone, and welcome to Discovery Presents Chats with Changemakers. I'm your host, Tiffany, and I'm a ninth grader in Texas. I participated in Discovery's Future City competition when I was in middle school. Every Friday, we will welcome a different guest from the engineering community. Today, our special guest is Molly, a cyber engineer at Raytheon. Molly, welcome.
Thank you, Tiffany, for having me.
So I understand that you get to hunt cybersecurity threats for a living. What's that like?
Well, that's a lot of fun, to be honest. um, I think one of the things I like most about kind of hunting hackers, for lack of a better word, is that it is always interesting and always changing so fast.
Right. So that's a really cool job. When did you decide that you wanted to do that?
You know, just about 5 years ago. Um,
Really?
yeah, so before I was a kind of an engineer of this sort, I was a middle school chemistry teacher. And so I did that for a few years, about five, and needed a little bit of a change and thought, I think I'll give this a try, and fell in love with it.
So did you have to go back to school?
I did. It was interesting. I didn't have to go back to too much school. One of the great things about this kind of job is it really is focused on your skills. So for instance, I went to a community college and got an associate's for a couple years, and then I had enough background to do it. But then I've also worked with some incredibly talented people. I worked with this one guy who was 18, fresh out of high school, and he was incredible.
Awesome. So in order to hunt these cybersecurity threats, how much of the knowledge you used did you learn at school versus on the job?
Great question. So I would say what I learned at school was basically kind of the building blocks, like how does traffic go across the internet, those kinds of things. And everything else, I just learned on the job, read a lot. Yeah,
Awesome. So what does a typical day of work look like for you?
yeah, you got it. So a typical day usually involves kind of, well, for lack of a better word, checking traps. So a big part of my day is learning about the latest ways people break into everything. You get to get kind of nitty gritty. And so then each day as new exploits, new attacks come out, new incidences, I get to make these little logic traps. And they sit there and they work and they analyze data. So come in the morning, kind of check them out, and then see if anything interesting for me happened, although my clients don't like it when interesting things happen. So
Wow, so every day is like something different?
always, you never quite know what to expect.
So what's the best thing about being a cybersecurity hunter?
I would say probably the best thing is the community. The people I work with, they are fun, they're interesting, they're from all walks of life. And they're all so smart and they're so willing to help you learn. Like in a field like this, nobody knows everything. And so it's really refreshing if you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what this means. And then on Twitter or the people you work with will be like, oh, hey, check this stuff out. So I think the people,
Yeah. So do you work with people like online?
I do all day long. We've got little groups and we send information back and forth or talk to other clients in their security groups. So yeah, it's all online.
Awesome. So can you describe exactly how you hunt down attackers?
Yeah, definitely. All right. And so one of the ways we hunt down attackers is we try to figure out what they want. Okay. So one example that's really big right now is people will break into hospitals, unfortunately, or um, and they will try to encrypt everything so that you give them money. It's called ransomware, right?
Hmm.
There are some very predictable ways that that happens. So we even follow threat groups. And that's kind of like when a small group of individuals um, attack in a very particular way. So we learn about all of their attacks. We kind of profile them, for lack of a better word, and then understanding how they do it, we get to set those little traps. So
Wow. So how do you like stop them?
Great. So we do a couple things. One, we work with a lot of really interesting technology. So there's a lot of high-end products out there that we have access to and we get to play with, we get to search through, we get to program. And so we put the logic in there so that we can stop them before they get in.
Okay, so what's the most interesting case that you've ever solved?
Oh, that is a great one. So this particular case was kind of an insider job, for lack of a better word. And there's some information that people had found out on the internet for a client, and the client couldn't figure out where it came from. And so they came to me and my team, and we started to put together kind of a profile of who had access to it, when it could have left, and we started looking at the logs, and then we were able to kind of narrow down who it was. So that was fun.
How long did that take?
Well, this particular one actually didn't take too long. I think we got it done in about a day. So
Wow, that's quick.
yeah, they're not always that quick, but that was nice.
So are these like cyber attacks pretty frequent?
Oh my goodness, they are nonstop. As an example, if you had a computer just on the internet that someone could log into, in about 7 minutes, it has already been scanned a number of times by people trying to break.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So since they're pretty frequent, like what can we do to protect ourselves against these attackers?
Oh, that is another great question. Probably the best way to protect yourself is kind of stay aware. And what I mean by that is pay attention to um, what kind of password you use if you reuse them. A lot of times what will happen is an online platform will get attacked and someone will come in and steal all the passwords, right? Then they'll shuffle away and then they'll sell them to everybody who wants them. And then other organizations in the background will take those same passwords and use them against companies, right? So it's kind of like a shuffle. So if we try to use different passwords for our social media than we do for perhaps our school accounts or email accounts, and that's a great way to stay protected.
Okay. So what do you think is the biggest cybersecurity risk to our American society as a whole?
Well, I would say the biggest risk, probably at the moment, there's probably two. Ransomware is really big just because it's so destructive, you know. The other one that is really large is that um, some of these groups come in and they steal American information, to go back and use in other places. So I would say those two are probably the biggest threats in my opinion.
Okay. So do you think that it's possible to have a cybersecurity event that could be as devastating to our economy as the coronavirus?
Ooh, that is a really great one. Um, I would say, oh, I hate to use the word, but maybe. So in Ukraine, they had some really, really rough attacks on the power grid, and they were very carefully planned, and that had a huge impact. And so when we look at the infrastructure of America, and so many things are connected, I think there's always a probability that that could happen. So we have to keep watching. Be careful.
Right. So this is a really amazing field that you're in. If there are students watching right now that are interested in cybersecurity, what piece of advice would you give them to help them develop that interest?
Oh my goodness. Be curious. Um, just just kind of read a lot. Conferences. Each city has little conferences, and usually they're called B-sides, and they're not very expensive. I think the one in Iowa is about $30. And so you can go there and you can meet professionals. They'll let you in at any age, and you can just kind of get a feel for what people do. Um, yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we need, and why I'm super hopeful that some of you will check this out, is because we need creative, interesting people who think differently. Hackers are
Yeah.
incredibly creative, right? They find all of the weird ways that we never think about. So we have to be just as creative.
Yeah. So what's the most like difficult case that you've ever solved?
Oh, definitely. I think one of the most difficult one was tracking an attacker once they got into a network. So, like if we think about networks as big roadways, right? So if your city is your network, right, someone comes in on one part of the city, but then they branch out and they check everything out. So one of the more difficult things is once they get in, they'll change identities, right? They'll be like, oh, I'm no longer me. I'm going to take over this account and move over here. So um, kind of that game sometimes you see people play with the hidden ping pong ball under the, yeah, those. And probably the easiest way, or the way that I found them that time, was tracking their tools, like what they were using, because they had to transfer them. So that was tricky.
What kind of tools were they using?
Oh my goodness. Well, um, one of the great things and frustrating things about security work is that the majority of the tools people use to attack computers are all free and they're all online. And so,
Really?
yeah, right? It's kind of a bit of an eye opener. So people can find these and then use them and move them around. So the other thing that I get to do in my job, which is kind of fun as well, is I get to take all of those tools and learn about them in a safe place. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah. So it's important to try new things even if they're hard. Is there any part of your career that maybe hasn't gone as well? Maybe you failed at something and you learned from that experience?
Oh my goodness, yeah. So I'm not afraid to say I fail every day. So like there's like a new attack that comes out or a new malware. While I'm trying to understand it, generally I don't get it on the first go. You know, there are still attacks that I'm still learning how to find. So, in a more academic sense, I use statistics sometimes in my job, but I was not very good at it in school. In fact, I think I might have got a D on it the first time I took it. And just, had to try again. Um,
Hmm.
don't beat yourself up. It's complicated stuff and it takes time.
So what classes did you take in college? Like you mentioned statistics. Are there any others that really helped you?
Um, yes, I would say the two most important classes I took was logic and critical thinking. And that was really tricky too. It wasn't math, but it was just understanding, hey, if this happens, does this happen? That kind of stuff. And then the other one was probably English. I do so many reports. And wording is so very important when you're about to tell a company that it got compromised. You have to be very careful. So,
Yeah. So we have an audience question. So this person is really interested in this type of career. What kind of salary is possible for someone with no experience in the field and an associate's degree?
that's a great question. And I'll tell you, so right after I got my associate's degree, I ended up working for a firewall company making $40,000. So that was just right after a 2-year degree. Um, and sometimes you can do better. So um, yeah, that's nice.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you about the future of cybersecurity. So, for example, what do you see yourself personally working on 10 years from now?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I would say in 10 years from now, um, how we look for events and like incidences and hackers is going to be so different. I think we're going to rely more on kind of machine learning and AI. We're trying to get it to work now. Some of it does work pretty well, so there'll be more of that. I also think that it's actually going to be more creative because one of the great things about it is we deal with all this data, right? So anyone out there who loves to deal with data and like mine through stuff, it's just going to get bigger. So we're going to find hopefully more creative ways to correlate or bring things together. Um, I worked at one company that was using some kind of fun graphics, where you could wave your hand around and like move stuff. It felt very sci-fi. So I'm interested.
Wow.
Yeah,
So, are you pretty familiar with AI?
I am. So I'm about this familiar. Like the products I use it, and I recently started taking a course on, how to make it work. So I have a basic understanding, but not an expert by any means.
Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit more about like what you know about it?
Yeah, definitely. So what I understand about it is that it has to do with um, finding a way to group things. So like what we do just naturally, like when we look at two things, we can tell they're different just because we're human, right? Our brains work really well that way. And so they're trying to get computers to do that. And then they're trying to link things to it. So here's a better example. So on your computer, it's creating logs all the time for everything you do, right? We're making just, oh, I don't know, a bunch right now. So what they can do with AI right now is they can try to figure out when something changed, right? So what they're going to look for is all of these kind of look the same. Maybe all of these kind of happen at the same time. And then it wants to find the difference. So it can point it out like, oh gosh, Molly's usually on these sites all morning. Oh my goodness, why did this site pop up? Let's go check it.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we have another audience question. They say that they like the guitars in the background and they're wondering if you play any instruments.
Thank you. So I play a lot of instruments very badly. So when I was being a teacher, I took a lot of classes on jazz piano. So I picked that up,
Wow.
and yeah, I love music. Just love it. So
Yeah. So in what ways do you think that your job encourages you to be a change maker?
well, I think two things. This whole career needs a change. It really does. We need fresh thinking. We need people who think about stuff differently, bring different answers. Because generally speaking, when you're a defender doing the kind of work I do, you're going to lose 99% of the time, right? And that is just not good enough. So we
Yeah.
need all of you to try this out and see if it's fun to do investigations, and track stuff down and ultimately kind of protect people. It's kind of what it is. So.
Very nice. So we have another audience question. What is the most rewarding aspect of your job?
Oh my gosh, knowing you stopped it, you know, when you go in and you see that trap you set, that rule stopped an organization, maybe a hospital, from being just annihilated by ransomware, it feels so good. You're like,
Really?
all right, yeah.
So how often does that happen?
Um, let's see. So on the wins, when you get your rule right, it happens really regularly. The hard part is keeping up with the learning curve of the attacks. So yeah, if you can stay ahead of the curve, you can do really well, but you don't win them all. So sometimes you miss them.
Right. Okay, we have another audience question. How would you recommend that kids protect their computers and stay safe online?
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So probably the first thing is to be careful what you share online. We're so used to just talking as if we're talking to someone in the same room, right? And so you want to be really careful that when you talk about yourself online, you're not giving away, kind of identifiable stuff like addresses, phone numbers, even email addresses. That can be kind of dangerous. And also pay attention to where you go online. It feels kind of like a cliche to say, but the shadier sites tend to be shady for a reason. They try to take advantage of things. So I would say watch where you go and watch what you share.
Right. Okay, so now I'd like to talk a little bit more about you. What do you like to do in your spare time?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So in my spare time, I play a lot of music. And also I do a lot of gardening. So I live out on a little farm. So we just got chickens about 6 weeks ago.
Oh,
I'm trying to learn how to raise chickens, and that's kind of entertaining. And I also love to play video games, and I love to ride motorcycles. So,
awesome. What types of things do you garden?
well, right now we're doing a lot of peppers. So I've got all of these like crazy pepper breeds. And one is supposed to taste like a habanero without any heat. So I'm really excited about that one because I'm kind of a wuss when it comes to hot sauce.
Me too. So what do you like to eat for breakfast?
Generally speaking, it turns out to be something like Fruit Loops, to be quite honest.
Oh, yes. Has that changed at all since the quarantine?
Oh my goodness, I eat more of them. I don't know if that's an answer.
Yeah. So have you been able to work from home during the quarantine? I know you mentioned that you work from home all the time, but has your job changed in any way?
You know, not a lot, and that kind of is a little strange. You know what I mean? So when the quarantine hit, it was kind of business as usual for me. Not a lot changed, and so a little bit insulated from that.
So we have another audience question. What is a skill that you haven't quite mastered yet, but you would like to?
Ah, that's a great one. So one that I would really like to get better at is reverse engineering malware.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so I can do it badly, for lack of a better word, right? But I really, really admire those people who can take that program and just tear it apart. You know what I mean? And see everything inside of it. Yeah.
So I'm going to transition to some more fun and random questions. If you could have any superpower, what would you choose and why?
Oh my goodness, easy. I would fly. It looks so much fun. Oh my goodness.
And if you had a time machine, what time period would you choose to visit and why?
Ooh, let's see. I think I'd go to the future, about 50 years, and just see how it all panned out.
Right. Um, it seems like you have a lot of impressive achievements. Can you tell me the one accomplishment, it could be related to your career, but it doesn't have to be, that you are the most proud of?
Oh, that's a great question. Hmm. I think the accomplishment I'm most proud of, um, that's a deep one. I think getting married. It seems like a funny one, but it had a great impact. So, yeah.
Right. What is something we wouldn't know just by looking at you? Do you have any hidden talents or interests?
Ooh, let's see. So, as far as odd talents go, I can breathe air out of my eyes. You know that little like tear duct? I try really hard, and I won't do it because I look silly. It'll. So that's one of my strange talents. And I can juggle. So.
Wow, very cool. We have our last question. It's an audience question. What advice do you have for kids who are interested in a career like yours?
Excellent. I would say go for it. Don't be afraid of it. I think sometimes people think that computer work has to be all math and just really isolated and like you got to work in a basement kind of thing. And I want to tell you, it's not that. There's a big community. People are super fun, and we need you. We need you.
Right. Well, Molly, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope that you all will join us again next Friday, where we'll meet Jonathan, a structural engineer at ASCE. Until then, I hope everyone has a great week.
Thanks, Tiffany.